Well, here we are again. Seems like I'm meeting with y'all every other week now, or every week. Today, we are going to go over the submission process. So we've talked about the changes that are coming up for the fall, and now we're going to talk about how to get those into the state, all of our data into the state. And raise your hand if it's the first time you have ever done a full submission. Okay, good. We've got a few, and I have some information in the PowerPoint that we've gone over during the fall review as well, but I won't spend a lot of time on that. But there are some who are here today who are not here for the fall review, so we're going to touch on it, but I won't bore you with a lot of details today. I want to introduce myself in case you have not been to one of my workshops. My name is Jennifer Sanderson, and I am the team specialist at Region 7. Danette Hedrick was here before me, and she retired in September. And so I've taken on her position. And then Michelle Carpenter, who was sitting at the back a moment ago, she took over for Artie Garlock. So she's in teams as well as helping with the Texas student software as a consultant for them. Our contact information is in the PowerPoint. Thank you, Texas. And before we get started on that, I do want to give you a little bit of information that we received at a TEA conference this summer. They were telling us about how, they bark about that delete utility and not to overdo it, not to use it a whole lot. And there's a reason for that. We have so many districts sending in data every submission, and the system gets bogged down with all of that data, and then it starts spinning. And with this new Tsds, it's almost where it gets on and it goes around, and then you're kind of in line in this queue, and you can't get off until somebody gets off there, get on until somebody gets off. So you're waiting for your cart to come around. And with all of the large districts we have in Texas, think about Dallas and Fort Worth and some of the really big ones that are in Houston who are getting in there too. That's a lot of data. And so now we don't have to wait for each one of them to finish. We're just waiting for that spot to get in. And so it is better than it was with Edit Plus, but it does still take a while. And so just to give you an idea, the number of records that were promoted in the summer were over 5 billion. And then the number of records in teams at the end of the summer, 249 million. Average execution time in minutes, 31. That's not bad. Number of promotions that took over 2 hours, 600. And then when they talked about that, they started telling us about the deletes. And we want to be careful with the deletes because it hangs up that process as much as anything else. It's the same thing as when you're sending data in. If you're deleting, it takes the same amount of time to do the deletes. So they don't want us to hold up the system with a lot of full deletes. They've added a function in there where we can do partial deletes now. It's going to make it a lot better. But they said that 1160 LEAs performed at least one full delete in the summer, and some campuses did as many full deletes as 190. And so we had one who did 190, one who did 113, and that's a lot of full deletes. So we can get started on some of our data, sending it up through to the ODS, but we don't want to start promoting and getting to the final stages. Of course, we can't now before snapshot, but you want to wait until you've got it as clean as you can so you don't get in the position where you're having to do a full delete. But like I said, we do have options now of not having to do that, but we just want to be careful with it because TEA is watching it. They gave us every single school district in our region, told us how many full deletes. That's how important it is to them. So just, and I'm not saying that 190 is one of us, it was in the state, but just be careful with that. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the submission process. And on page 2, you'll find our contact information. And I'm going to try to juggle all this. Our agenda today is we're going to touch on the data standards. We're going to talk about PIEMS roles and the TSDS system, and then the PIEMS process, and then our checklist. Okay, the data standards. We've talked about this the last few weeks. I just want to show you one more time about where you go, because the TEDS data standards is going to be your book that you're going to refer to constantly during this submission process. I like to have it identified on my favorites so I can go right to it. It's so big, you don't want to print the whole thing out, but there are pieces of it you might want to print out just to have handy. You go to the Tsds website, and then you'll go to Tsds. You'll go to the TEDS data standards. You can hover over where that arrow is. You can hover over that little area. It'll take you right to the data collections. Or if you click on it, it'll bring you to a screen like this. You click on the TEDS, the Texas Education Data Standards at the bottom of the page, and then that's when it brings you to this screen. Now, when you get here, when you're looking for the TEDS that we're going to use for the submission, you're going to get that second one. The first one is for dashboard users. The second one is going to be for PEIMS. And so you're going to collect that second one, and that's what you're going to use for your submission. Right under it, you'll see the TSDS core collections. That's going to be ECDS. And then the change logs, you can find this in two different places. This is when they make changes to the TEDS. You click on there, it'll give you a date when it was last updated, and you can go in and see if there have been any changes. You might want to check that periodically. Of course, we're going to send out information when it applies to you with the TEDS if there are any changes. But you might want to just check on that and make sure that you're keeping up with whatever they put out. If you look, if we click on this TSDS for PEIMS only, you go in here, you'll see down toward the bottom, you'll see the PEIMS appendices, and that's all we'll have an appendix for the levers and for the discipline, and the race ethnicity questionnaire is in there, and the pet information. So that's a really handy area to go to find all the appendix and what you might need in there. Especially for the levers. The lever appendix is very helpful. It has the codes and the descriptions on those. So that's all when you get into selecting PEIMS only for the TEDS. And you also see that right up there under 8, and it has an introduction, then it has 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, 4, and 5. On this screen, this is referring to the first one. 8.1 is talking about the submission collections and the due dates. 8.2 will give an explanation of the data elements. You'll hear data elements a lot because that's the entry that we have to have that we're looking for. We're going to be pulling out of our software system. That's the E that you see, those E1050, some of those are elements. And so you'll hear us refer to elements a lot. Within the elements, you'll have code tables. So anyway, 8.2 is an explanation of data elements. 8.3 is data elements by complex type. Complex type is going to be the bigger picture. It's going to be, as far as staff, it would have the staff extensions, and it'll have student extensions for students, and that's the bigger picture. And then the elements are within the categories, or the complex types too. They're interchangeable. 8.4, that's where you're going to find the codes for the data elements. So within a data element, you have a code table if it does require one. Some data elements are just going to be, if you're a data element might be a district number, an LEA number. That's just going to be a 6-digit number. But if it has a code table you need to refer to, that will be in the element chart, and then you'll know where to go. And I'll show you that in just a minute. 8.4, the CO22 extract is going to be, or excerpt, is going to be for the service IDs. And it's also going to include all of the code tables. 8.4 has two different pieces on here. The 8.4 description of codes is going to be all code tables, and they also give you a separate one just for the service IDs, and that's the CO22. And then the 8.5 is a PEIMS business validation and rules and validation. That's where you're going to go to find those errors that you get in the submission. We talked about the appendices. Okay, let's turn to the next page. And this is 8.1. Within 8.1, you'll find that XML file naming, how they come up with that. You know, when you go into your software system and you bring out a file for the PEEM submission, when you do the extract, it gives you a file name, and this gives you what that file name is made up of. And then on the next slide, 8.1, this goes into the different categories, and this is the order in which they're submitted for submission. You're going to see these charts all over the TEDs, but they're in there for different reasons. This one in 8.1 is actually giving you a list of those complex types, and it's telling you when you're going to submit them, and it also gives you which order they have to go in. There is a specific load order for submissions. However, if you zip up a file, it will put it in there for you in that order. But if you know how we're doing those crisis code and we only need 3 things, and we only had to have the ed.org and the student enrollment. Well, those have to go in a certain order. Just like every other submission for fall, summer, extended year, they all have to go in a certain order. And so this gives you that order, and then in which submission you send it. So if you look in that fall column, you can look over and see, okay, I've got to put in the ESC has put in their number, then the local LEA puts in their number, the school, and then the course. Now I skipped over a class period up here because it's not required for the fall. So this is just telling you that I've got to submit these things under the ed.org category, and ed.org goes in first. The next thing that's going to be going in is the student extension here. So you can see that these interchanges are in order on how you're going to load them in the system. But again, if you zip your files, it'll zip them up in the right order for you. Sometimes when you have, when we get into the summer and we've got so many interchanges we have to send in, then you run out of space on that first page. Remember how it goes to 9 and you may have 11? Then you can zip them and then put them in that first page all together. But if you want to load them separately, I'm kind of weird that way. I like doing them separately, but but zipping is great. That's a very efficient way to do it. I like controlling it. I guess I'm a control freak. So that's the 8.1 will show you the order. Okay. Then this is what an interchange looks like. If you open up one of those interchanges that you have extracted out of your software system, this is what it's going to look like. And it's going to show you all of the fields that it's pulling out of your software. And that's what those bolded fields are. It's going to show you what it's taking out. And you can do searches in here. This is where if you are wanting to look for something, you can search in here. You can send it to Notepad++. You can actually look for line numbers in there. We'll talk about that again in a minute. So if you look here, remember on the last slide when we were looking at what was going to be submitted for the ed.org, we're going to send the LEA number, the school, which is the campus number, and the course number, because those are the ones that are checked over in the fall column. And so we know that we're going to be doing those. Well, when you look at this interchange for the ed.org, you'll see that it has the LEA at the top, it has the school, and then it'll have, on the next one, it'll have the course. And so these are all what's pulled for that fall submission for the ed.org. And then I put a slide in here just to show you what the load order is. If you are one who wants to put them in one by one, this is the order in which they have to be entered. And the zip will zip them up in that order. Now, for fall, we have 7 interchanges, but if you're not affiliated in any way with an SSA, then you won't have that one. You'll just have 6. So if you ever have anything that you're not taking part of, let's say in the summer you did not have any student restraints, you can knock that number down on the interchanges because you won't have to submit anything for that if you don't have any data to submit. And then this just, I've added a column in this one that came straight out of the TEDS. I've added a column over to the right of when it's due to us. These are the due dates for TEA, but to Region 7, we want them here a week before so we can make sure that we've been able to review them and then we can send them up to TEA on time. So the dates on the right are going to be when they're due to Region 7. And then the data submission requirements are in 8.2. This is another chart that lists the categories, subcategories, complex type, category codes, and it's in order by category code. See over on the right, where earlier we were looking at them by submission order and a load order. Now this one breaks it down into category code order. And then one more in 8.2 is going to be an alpha list. So now we're looking at it by the categories and the complex types and the alpha list here. That one may be one that you want to print. You don't need to print a whole lot out of the TEDS, but you might want to print that one just to keep it handy and see when you're reporting those items. Because these charts do give you that wonderful list over on the right that tells you when you're going to be submitting. Okay, in 8.3, this is where we're going to see within each complex type there are data elements, and they're broken down by category. So I know at the beginning we talked about 8.1 of the TEDS, 8.2 through 8.5, they had different areas, and they had different items you would find within them. Well, now we're going to break it down even farther. When we get within 8.3, we can actually go in and find different pieces of the TEDS that are going to relate to these 5 categories. So with every team submission, you're going to have ed.org, finance, staff, and student, and then the campus course is reported in the summer. But you're going to always have, but finance isn't in all of them, but I'm just saying these are the different categories of the data elements. So when we get into 8.3, now we can drill down to these different categories. And so if I go into 8.3.1, it's going to give me data elements for the ed.org. 8.3.2 is going to give me for finance, and so forth. So if I look on this next slide, that's where I see this. That's what that is breaking it down into. The 8.3.1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 will break it down into those different areas. Okay, and this is an example of what, if we're looking at a complex type, which is that 10010. Now, this is the big group, and then within the 10010, you're going to have the elements. And so the local education agency, LEA, is going to be a complex type, and then within that complex type, it has different elements that you have to report. And so within each interchange, you've got complex types. Within each complex type, you have elements. So this is the 10010 that we're going to look at as an example. This is the LEA. And what are we going to report for the LEA? For the fall, we're going to look in this 1 column under PEAMS, right here. The Tsds is going to be for dashboard. And then the 1 is going to be for fall PEAMS. 2 is for mid-year. 3 is for summer. And 4 is for extended year. And so we're going to look at 1 right now for fall. Well, we're going to look and see what we have to report this time. And it'll tell you next to them the district ID, and it'll tell you what you have to report. And the M, by the way, is for mandatory. And do you remember we used to have those first, second, third case, and they're no longer in there. Okay, the 8.3.1 is we're going to look at what an element table looks like. And this was within the LEA. You see right above there, it says 10010. And then this is an element within the LEA. Follow it back on the other screen. See O212 at the top. Now we're looking at O212 element table. And it has the element ID is, the description of it, when that was first started. Date issued is when they first began this element. And then if there were any updates to it, it would have it on the date updated. And it also tells you the XML name, which is the file name. And then also, if it had a code table, this one does not. This is that one we were talking about a while ago that is going to be an actual district ID. It tells you that it's the length of it is 6 numbers or 6 characters, and this one is actually going to be numbers, and it's going to be your district number. And that's why we don't have a code table for this one, because code tables are when you use a specific code that is translated into another item. And so if it had a code table, it would be listed there. Like this. This next one is for a student, and it has a code table E059. This is under ADA eligibility element. And so if we go to CO59, we'll be able to see our options. I think I had that on the next screen. Yes. There's the CO59, and it tells us what the different codes would be that we could put in for the ADA eligibility. It tells us that the length is 1, and then that data type coded, that just means that you can use letters, numbers, characters, and there are different ones for that. But anyway, so that's how you read these. These element tables have codes built in if they use a code table. And this also will give you the date issued and date updated on the right-hand side if they made any changes to it. Okay, and this 8.4 is the description of the codes. This is that code table. We have either looking at all code tables, or we can look at just service IDs that are on that beginning pages of the TEDs. And this one gives you an alphabetical list. This is one I would definitely print and keep handy so that you'll know where you find it, which code table to go to, and if you have to have something that's entered in for submission, you can go straight to this and find where to find it. The 8.5 business rules and validations lists the category codes in numerical order. So here, these are in numerical order. And again, it tells you what submission. I mean, I can't tell you how many charts we have in the TEDs about when to submit, which I think is great, but it gives it to you in every kind of format you could want. Now, this is not load order. This is going to be just category code numerical order. And so the organization, the EdOrg is at the top, and then finance, because they're number 2, and their category codes start with 2. The staff is the next one. It starts with a 3. The students, the next one, starts with a 4. And then the courses would be number 5. And they are broken down that way. And then we can come here to see them in numerical, or if we're looking for a specific category code number. Here's the rest of the chart. Now, when you're in that 8.5, this is where you'll go to find those error messages that you get. You'll see that top line is divided into 2. Within each rule number, and they still show us what it used to be in Edit Plus, just because we had so many years of experience in Edit Plus, they want to show us this used to be this. So are you familiar with that number? And now we've changed it to this rule number. They're trying to transition us over a few years into looking at these new rules. So the rule number will be listed, and then over next to it, you'll have 2 lines within each rule. The first one is what you're going to see when you get those error messages, when you're doing the submission. When you get the errors and you click on it and it says, if shared service arrangement type code is 10, then fiscal agent district ID must not be 227906. Well, sometimes, now that one's easy to understand, but sometimes if they're kind of not clear, you can look on the second line and it'll tell you exactly what it means. They have a better description underneath. And so if you'll go to this 8.5, that's where you can find those error messages. It'll also tell you in the error level column whether it's a F for fatal, a warning, or a special warning. Now, the fatals, you have to clear all of those out before you can do your submission. You may not submit with any fatals at all. It won't take it. If you have special warnings or warnings, you can submit with those. It'll tell you that you're completing it with errors. You can submit it, but you want to have it as clean as you possibly can. If there are going to be some exceptions, maybe you don't have any GT students in your district, you're going to get a warning that says, well, most districts have a GT program and want you to take a look at it and make sure that you have those coded. Are y'all freezing in here? Okay, I am too. And I'm usually hot when I'm talking, so thank you, Michelle. And so anyway, the F, S, and W will tell you what kind of a warning or an error that it is. 8.7 has examples of the interchanges. And so if you need to go in and find out, compare maybe one interchange to another. The other day we had one interchange we were pulling from the system, and it was actually for unique ID. We were pulling in some information, and you can compare, when you're doing extracts for submissions, you can compare this interchange that's given to you in 8.7. They've got an example for every single interchange file. You can compare it to the one you pull. Then you can easily go down and say, oh, they've got some numbers in that state organization code and mine's blank. Then you can see what you're missing. And so that's a really good tool to use if you think that the problem might be with your interchange. However, you don't want to make changes in your interchange. This is just a tool to use to compare and see where the problem is. But when you need to make changes, you do it in the software system, and then you extract again, or if you've done it in your software system and in the frozen file, you can just pull more interchanges and do it that way instead of fixing it in this. You don't want to touch your interchange. But this is a good tool to use to find an issue. And it has examples in there for all of the interchanges, for the EdOrg, the EdOrg calendar, master schedule, student, all of them, all 13. And in fall, we won't be reporting all 13, but this 8.7 has an example of all of them. And then here is where you'll find the different appendix that you would want to use. And there, in 8.B, there's an alphabetical list of data elements. We saw that in another area as well. And 8.D is the lever. 8E is the appendix for the discipline. F is ethnicity and race information, and then it also will have the questionnaires split up down below it. And then there's an appendix for the PET, and I'm not quite sure what that last one's supposed to mean, but it says, I do know what it means, but they have a little typo there, early notice of PEMS reporting changes for the 2018-18 school year. So I'm sure they'll get that changed. But if you want to know what's coming up in the future, if you're already concerned about what's going to happen in 2018-19, you could go there and take a look at that. Okay, and this is at 8.B, that is the complex types in alphabetical order. It's going to be the elements that are sorted in alphabetical order. And you'll see that here, these are the elements, the E numbers. And you'll see that some of these are used for more than one complex type. For instance, some of the, let me find one down here, the actual amount, the very top, that's used in the complex type for actual extension and in the SSA. And then some of the race codes are used for student, staff, teacher. They're used in several places. So if you are needing to find these based on element in alphabetical order, this is the appendix you would use. And then here is the change log that you can pull up. This is found on that first page when you go into TEDS. And it also will show you when something was released. So you might check this every once in a while just to see if any changes have happened. And if you see a date past 9/1, you'll know that something's happened since the beginning of the school year when they first released the TEDs. Okay, the PEIMS roles. Now, as the superintendents are going to be, well, let me start here. Okay, this is just a chart showing, it might be hard for you to see on the screen, but on your handout, this is showing the different roles you can have within every subsystem. And so it starts over here saying, okay, if you log into TEAL, these are the different places you can go, either to T-REX, to the Tsds portal, or ECOS educators. And when we're going into PEIMS, we're going to be using that Tsds portal. You know, T-REX is used for the record exchange within Texas schools. The TS portal hosts just about everything else. It's going to be the dashboard, and it has the EDM, which is the Education Data Mart, the PEIMS information, the unique ID system, ECDS, and the TIMS tickets. And pretty soon you're going to see PET over here too. This is where PET's going to fall. And so that's just a chart showing all those subsystems, and over on the right, you'll see the different roles you can have within those subsystems. Now, superintendent will be a data approver, and then the PEIMS coordinator should have the PEIMS data completer, ODS loader, and if you use the service account, if you use a DTU, you would have a service account manager. I know of one district who uses a DTU. I'll talk to you about that in just a minute. But if you do have it, you'd have to have that service account manager role. And then the tech director will have the PEIMS data submitter, ODS loader, and also that service account manager. Within each of these roles, you can select what you want to do within them. And so if you have campuses, they can have a different role, and you can either allow them to do some of the submitting, some of the pushing through to the ODS, or you can just have them do viewing only. So within every role, it's not encompassing a lot of different rights. You can select which rights you want it to have. You can do that. I have to repeat every question because we have distance learners. She asked about her principals wanting to go in and look at reports only. And so you would go to this chart back here, and you can go in and you can find PEIMS data. You could do the PEIMS data submitter and just allow them to have access to view only, or the approver. Some of those will just allow accessing reports. And so they have to have a role to be able to access the information, but within each role, it has levels of rights. And so you would go in and you can uncheck what you don't want them to do and just have them view only. Same with campuses. And there's also the ODS part, that if you want them to be able to see the final reports in PEIMS, you'll give them a role in the PEIMS part. Okay? Now on the next screen, we are looking at what the system is going to look like when you go in. And do all of you have, I'm sure you do, all of you already have your roles set up because we've been doing those crisis. Right? Does anybody need assistance with this part? Now, let's get into the same PEIMS submission process. There is a way in your software system to extract the information you're going to need for PEIMS. And those software systems are already set up so that they know if you click on fall, it's only going to extract the information that you need. And so if you're not sure about how to do the extracts, just check with your software vendor and get some help with those from the consultants with them. But if they they should be set up where you can say, okay, I need fall 1 to come out of here, and it'll just extract the interchanges that'll be involved with fall. And if you have information in a human resources outside company other than your software student, then the HR system that you're using, you need to load that data before the student data. That always has to come in first if you're bringing it in from 2 different sides. You don't want to rename the files that are brought in from or exported from your software system. It already has the exact naming exchange that we need, and we saw that earlier about how it's set up, and that's the way that the TSDS is going to be looking for it. So don't change the name of the file. You'll want to use Internet Explorer when you're doing the submission. It's okay if you are using a different browser for your software, but then when you extract those files, you'll save them to your computer, and then when you're doing the submission, TEA only likes Internet Explorer right now, and so that's the easiest one that's compatible. I think they're going to change that in the near future, but it's pretty easy just to have that IE and just go with it every time, just to make sure you don't have any problems. That's what they recommend, so that's what we try to follow. And then it'll be extracted in that XML format, just the way the system brings it out. You don't have to do anything to that file once you get it out of your software. Now, this is the lovely map that we were given at the very beginning when they first rolled this out. And I think I screamed out loud when I first saw it, because I was just like, oh, okay. But once you start working in it, it makes more sense. It talks about how you start from the very beginning and the different areas you can go to. Now, this one that at the front of your PowerPoint, that was a little bit easier to read, and it doesn't get into all the technical detail. But this is pretty much what this is saying. It's saying that we start at the very beginning getting the information out of the software. And then this purple part in the middle is talking about that used to be called the client-side validation tool. Now it's called the converter and validator tool. Sometimes it's called the conversion and validation. They change those. I think they forget how they're using them, and on another document it'll be called something different. But that's what that is. That's that tool where you first get your data out of your system and you can send it through there. It's not looking to see if you're missing any coding as far as specific students, and it's not comparing things to anything else. All it's doing is looking at the format of the file, and it's going to let you know if anything within that file is not meeting the naming requirements. And then after you get it in there, that's when you start that submission process, where you first have to put it into the EDM. And once it goes through some validations in the EDM, then it lands in that ODS. And that's that ODS bucket right there in the middle that's green. And it just sits right there until you're ready to do whatever you need to do with your data. And so it comes out of your software. You can run it through that validation tool if you want to. That's not a mandatory tool. If you want to use it, fine. They haven't even updated it yet to be in line with the TEDs for this year. And so right now, it's not going to catch everything. So I wouldn't even use that until 1020 is when they're releasing it. They were going to release it 1027, and now they've moved it up to 1020. But if you like that tool, that's fine. You can use it. I'm just telling you it's not mandatory. Okay, so then after it goes to that tool, then you put it in EDM, and then once you've ran it through some checks in the EDM, it goes into that ODS bucket. And from that bucket, that's where you can use it in Teams. You can use it in some of the core collections, and it goes to different areas from there. And then the fourth part is going to be right in here. The very first one is the, I can't see, Teams, says the Teams Data Mart, and then the core collections and, excuse me, and dashboard. So you have your options there. Now, when we do summer Teams, and we have that ECDS due at the same time, that's when you have loaded information for summer PEIMS and it's sitting in that ODS bucket, and you can send through your summer PEIMS. And then when you're ready to do ECDS, you just come right back and send it to ECDS, because that ODS still has that data in there from the summer. And that's what's going to be used to move into ECDS. Everybody following that? Any questions on that? Well, I'm going to, yes, you may. She asked if there's another place you can print it off and read it. It is in the, I'll send you one that you can print on a bigger sheet, but I also have a handout in your packet that I made for you that it's not as technical, but it takes you through all the steps you'll need. If you have this for this PEIMS submission, and then you have the front page, that little diagram on the front page of the PowerPoint, this is a very simple piece of what this big process map is. And then this thing that I made for you, it may not make as much sense to you as it does to me, but you know how it's divided here in a blue line and a yellow line? The top part of this chart is talking about what goes into the ODS and the way that you get it from beginning to the ODS. The bottom part of that chart is talking about how to get it from the ODS into PEIMS and through and get it approved. And so I just kind of, I made this based on what makes sense to me and the different steps, hoping that you can use this when you're doing your PEIMS submission to see where I go from where. And we'll talk about this in a minute too. But yes, in answer to your question, that was a long answer. I can provide you with that process map, and you can print on a bigger sheet if you want to. I know when I first went to a Tsds training, they had it on a big one. I mean, it was that 17 by 11 or something. It was huge. And then, but they do publish this in different documents, so we'll get it for you. Okay, the converter and validator tool is what that client-side validation tool is called now. And you'll want to download that on your desktop. I did tell you it's optional. It is a great tool, but it's not ready yet. It'll be ready 10/20. And if you don't already have it on your desktop, the way you get it is to go into Tsds, and you'll go into the Tsds and then into Utilities. And once you click on that, it'll give you the option to download the validation tool. And so you'll see that at the very top. You'll click on that, and then you'll add it to your desktop. And after you have it there, then you can just send files into it, and you would click on that from your desktop and upload some files, and it will automatically send them through and check the format of them for you. And if there are any ever any updates, it would give you a pop-up saying, okay, we need to update the validator tool, and give you the option of doing that. And the help up here on the left, file and help, the help will tell you what version you're on. And if you click on that, it'll also tell you that there's a new version available. And then you could click on it and update it. So when you're going into the validation tool, you would select the school year and the collection. It looks very similar to when you're doing a PEIMS. And then upload the files. You'll browse and upload those files. Now this one will not take zipped files. And also, this one does not, one interchange doesn't rely on another interchange like they do in PEIMS. You know, in PEIMS, when you're entering student information, you had to have already had the ed.org information in there, and it looks at that too. But in the validator tool, it's just looking at the naming convention you have in there and the different files and just making sure that the format is correct. So you cannot zip them. You just send them in, highlight all of them, and send them in, but you can't zip it. And then you would process the files, and it would tell you the status of them. if they failed or not. So on this one, it failed, and then you would have to go back. You could click on the details down at the bottom, and it would tell you why it failed. And then you could open that in Notepad, excuse me, you can open the interchange in Notepad++, and then you can, this details will tell you what the error was. And so when you open it in Notepad++, you can do a Control-G, go in and find that line number, and then locate what the problem was. Then you make the changes in your software, and then pull these interchanges back out and send it in again until you get to the passed status. Once you get to passed, you're ready to go. Okay, after the validation tool, we're ready to put it in the eData Manager. Now, when you go into Teams, into TSDS, and you go into the TSDS portal, then this is what you're going to see when you come in. This is where we found that utility to download the client-side validator tool. And conversion, we can just call it anything we want to. Converter and validator, conversion and validation. Anyway, that's where you find that tool. But also, when you come into TSDS, you're going to come to this screen. This is where you go to do the unique ID system. This is also where you go to do the submissions. The first thing we need to do is going to be that manage data loads. And what that's doing is it's looking at all of those interchanges that you got, and it's going to make sure that there are not any errors in there. So when you come in, you click on manage data loads, and then excuse me, over on the left-hand side under interchange menu, you'll click on the interchange upload. And when you do that, you'll have an opportunity to select the collection. And we're going to do the 2018 Fall 1 this first time around. You'll select that. And again, we hope that you're in Internet Explorer while you're doing this, so it'll run a lot more smoothly for you. Some of those other browsers don't have all the functionalities of Internet Explorer for this process. That's the way the programmers built it, and so that's why they recommend it. So you'll select the collection, and then you're ready for the file manager. You're going to browse for the files that you saved on your computer from the software system. And you can highlight all of them and zip them, or you can load them in one by one. And this is the load order that is going to be for the fall. And it's the same load order all the time, but these are the interchanges that are going to be sent in during the fall. The 7 of them, or 6 if you don't have an SSA. You can load them separately or zip them. And then once you get them in there, that's what it looks like. It found those files from your computer just like they came out of your software, and then they're listed on each line there. If you just had one zip file, then it'll show up on that file 1 under a zip. And then you'll click on Upload. And there's that little gear over there that starts spinning. And it's going to be right here and under Status. And while that's still going, then you have to keep refreshing it with those 2 blue arrows right up here. You need a pointer. And you'll keep clicking on that until you get some kind of response in that status column. And that's when you find out if they passed or not. So once you keep clicking that and refreshing it, then you get something that looks like this. You'll either have a red X or you'll have a green check. And the red X's just mean you have some errors within those. Now, 3 of these passed and 2 did not. And so in order to look at what the problems were in those red X's, you'll click on View File Content, and you'll be able to see the errors. So if I click on those, it's going to bring me to this screen. And down at the bottom, it'll have a line that says Error. And then I'll have a spyglass over on the right. You may not be able to see this, but this one says Error. and then it has a spyglass over there, and you click on that view file content, and it opens it up. And then you find your errors. If you ever have an error that says school warehouse, that's going to be found in that EDM dictionary. Let me see if I can get over and show it to you in TS and Teal. Let's see. Yes. Okay, if I go into the TEDS, the EDM dictionary is going to be listed on this first page when you first go into TEDS, and it's right down here. And that is going to have the errors that you get within this before you hit the ODS. That's where you find those errors. Those are going to be those school warehouse. There are a lot of them that will be listed. And so that's going to be the EDM dictionary. And that's where you find it, is on that first page when you first go into TEDS. And let me get back. Okay. So in this example, it's just showing us that it doesn't like something in this line. I don't know if you can see it or not, but it says the XSD CVC pattern, and that's also an EDM dictionary error message, is 0154-01000000. It says it's not valid with the pattern that's expected. Well, the problem with that is it should not have a dash in it, and it does. And so you could go to the EDM dictionary, find out what that error message means, and then you can go back to your software and correct it. And usually in the EDM, you're going to get those kind of messages that are talking about the format of it too. That's why the converter validator tool isn't a great tool, but you'll also catch those problems when you go through this part. So you can do both and not have to have those files all the way into the EDM and avoid some of those errors ahead of time, or you can just run them through and it's going to catch the same ones once you get in here. So if you receive an error in the file or batch manager, that's when you go into the EDM dictionary, and that's what I just showed you of where that's located. Right there. And this is what the EDM dictionary looks like. It is in different columns. It'll tell you, if you want to search for a specific error you got, then you can do a control find and try to locate it. You can also click on those little arrows at the top within the blue squares or rectangles, and you can click on that little arrow and it'll put them in order based on whatever column you're in. So that's how you use the EDM dictionary. Once you've corrected those errors and you bring those files back in, then you'll have all green check marks just like this. It's beautiful. And then you'll know that you're in great shape. And so this is the part where you put all those files uploaded, and it had to go through a check to make sure those files were okay. Well, now that we've got those individual files okay, now we're going to batch them up. So we first do the upload of the files, and then after that we have to do a batch, and we have to process the batch. Once we process the batch, that puts it in the ODS. So we do the files up there, and then we batch them up, and this is how we do the batch. Go to, we're still in that Manage Data Loads, and you're going to click on the box right by all of those interchanges. We have those green X's, so you're going to click on all of these, and you're going to add them to a batch. And then you want to view the batch, and we're here, and so this is where we're going to process them. You want to select all of them again, and select all of them, and then you're going to do process batch. Now we do have a new delete utility that's available. They just put it in August, where you can, at this point, when you're viewing the batch, if you need to make some changes and you just want to delete maybe the student category, you can do that at this point and then bring that file back in. And so this is a new delete. It says, do you want to perform the delete before the load? And you can do it at this point if you want to. You'll see that on your screen. I didn't have a print screen of that for the PowerPoint. The problem with my creating the PowerPoint is I can only use examples that are given from Tsds or past PowerPoints we've had, because I don't have access to actually go in, and I don't have a play database. I can go in and just grab and do a pretend submission. I'd give anything if they would provide that for us, but we don't have it. And so you'll see in my PowerPoints that I've got school district names blocked out. Some districts let us use their information in the past when they did a submission. They let us use their print screens. And so you'll see that I've blocked some of those out. And you'll also see some of my data is from 2015-16, some of it's from 27-18. It just depends on what I had to use that would make sense. Anyway, this is the new delete utility, and you will see that in your screens when you go in to do this. And then after you have processed the batch, then it will give you a listing of all the batches that you've got there. And when it's ready to process, you start clicking on those blue arrows again. And I know it seems like we go through the same process. I know y'all think you go through it 3 or 4 times. Well, you do. It makes you do the same thing over and over and over. But it's just a check and a recheck. And every piece of this has its own purpose. The very first one for File Manager is looking at those files individually. And then the process batch, it's looking to make sure you've got all the interchanges in there. And then the PEMS is looking for the specific codes and what matches up with what, and making sure that you have your students coded correctly. So they all have a reason. And so you may think you're living on top of this arrow that's going around and around, but there is a purpose for it. So you're going to click on that refresh to make sure that it goes through, and it'll say, if I can see, it'll say processing. And it might take a little while, and you just keep clicking on it. And now, when it comes through, this is a new feature too, where you can now download all error files at one time. You're going to see that when you go in. Otherwise, if you just had one, you can click over there on it, on that one line. But if you had several that had errors, you could click on download all error files and be able to see all of them at one time. And then if you just have that one, then you can scroll to the bottom just like we did on the File Manager. Click on the magnifying glass next to the error line, which is this one. And if I click on that file, that magnifying glass under View File Content, I'll be able to see what kind of errors I got. Then, if you had some errors, then you would go back in and correct those, and the software bring those files back in through the File Manager and then into the batch and process the batch again. And these are the different options that you'll see. You'll have ready to process, processing, complete with errors, and the green check, complete with errors with a red X, and then load plan failed. Okay. This part I'm not going to spend a lot of time on. This is the DTU, and it's the system, it's a utility where you can go in and you can tell it, pull these files in on a schedule. And so you tell it what interchanges you want it to get, and it'll take them from the ODS into the PEMS data mart. I have one district who uses it. I don't know if they use it regularly or not, but this is only if you want the system to do it on a regular basis, maybe once every week or week and a half or 3, whatever, then you could do it on demand or you can schedule it. And it runs it through all the validations. And I think it'd be more beneficial if you're using Dashboard and you want to bring it in to Dashboard and upload it on a regular basis. I don't see really the benefit of using it for the PEAMS part as much as I do for Now, Dashboard, I think it would be a great tool, but for PEAMS, it's just that you'll want to bring the information in when you get your corrections made, and that may not be on the system schedule. That's on your schedule. Okay, I have instructions in here of how to download that tool if you want to get it, and that's what it looks like. It first has to be installed on a server and on your computer, by the way, because when you're on your desktop, then it has to have been able to reach information that was on the server. And if you want to use this DTU, I can help you get through it, but I don't want to spend a lot of time because I don't think many of you are going to be accessing it. And this screen will tell you that service account manager role I was talking about earlier. It tells you how to get that role because you have to have that role to use the DTU. Got a lot of pages on that in here. We're not talking about it much. And then it just tells you how to schedule it, or if you can do it on demand too. Tells you which files to grab and more on the schedule and how to transfer them. Let's get through that. Whew. I mean, that's half my PowerPoint. Okay, right here is the PEAMS Data Mart, and we're going to take a break. So let's come back at 10:15, finish up in the submission. Think we're ready? Can you hear me in the back? All right, we're going to start with the PIMS data mart now. We've done the file manager, we've uploaded those files, and then we've processed them in the batch. And within that EDM, after you process them in the batch, then they go to that ODS bucket. And from the ODS, you'll see on your first page of your PowerPoint, it would go into the PIMS, the core collections, or the dashboard from there. So we're going to be working with the PIMS data mart today. That's also called the PDM. And when you go into the Tsds portal, these are your options again. We use the manage data loads, we've used the utilities, and now we're going to promote loaded data. You're going to select that box for promote loaded data. You will select the, up at the very top of your screen in the dark blue, you have the school district and then the year and the collection. Make sure those are on the right thing before you get started. You'll want to be on fall 1st, 2017-18. And then in the LEA, you're going to select all LEA data, and you want to do all categories. Where we are. And once you get into there, then it'll show you all the categories and subcategories that'll be promoted. And when you see them there, then you make sure that's what you want, and you click on Submit. Then it goes into the monitoring the data promotions, and this is where you're going to be able to follow the status of it. And it'll either be in progress, completed, or errors and failed. And guess what? We are going to click on those blue arrow refreshers again. And so you click on that, and when you click on that, that's what puts it into the completed stage, hopefully. You monitor the promotions, and then after you've clicked on refresh, then you want to see this completed or completed with errors. And when it says, let me see if I'm on the right screen here. Okay, so at this point, when you're on this screen, then you're going to click on the Validate Submission Data under that Validations tab at the top left, and go from there. So you're going to have to validate this information now, because we do the validating and the promoting. So to validate the data, then you would be on this screen. Let me get to the same page you're on. Getting ahead of myself here. You're going to validate the data. You're going to select the categories that you want. And then see down in this bottom part, it has fatal, special warning, and warning. Then you're going to want to see all of those errors. So make sure that those are all checked. And this is where it's going to compare the data that we put in there to the PIMS rules, the data standards. That's where it's going to start looking at all of that. You click on the validation name, you make the validation name, and then you click on Next. And then you confirm that that's what you want, and then you submit. You'll see in progress again, refresh, and then this is where you're usually going to have completed with errors. And it's going to be all the errors that you've made that little selection on, the fatal, special warning, and warnings. And so it's going to include any of those errors. And you can click on View on the far right on the error report to see those. Now this is what the errors look like. It'll tell you which category it's in. This is staff. It'll tell you the subcategory, basic information, what kind of error it is. These are fatals. And then the message. This is where you go, and if you need a better description of what this error message means, then you go to that 8.5 where you find the business rules and validations, and you look up that error 30040-0038, and it'll have the top line that says exactly this without the specific numbers. and then below it, it will identify the error, and it'll tell you exactly what it means in layman's terms. And so, yes. Sure. Okay. Is that what most of you do? Just fatals the first time? Okay. But they may be things you can fix. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Okay. Okay. For those of you listening online, one of our districts recommends just running fatals the first time through and getting that so the list will be shorter. You can run all of them at one time, or you can run just the fatals if you want to, but you are able to sort these errors by the severity of them. So you don't have to print all of them off, but if you just want to run fatals the first time, you can. But if you run fatals, special warnings, and warnings, then you can list them by severity on here by clicking on the arrow next to severity and listing the fatals at the top to take care of those. So you can do it either way. You can run it with all, or you can do just fatals the first time through. And some of the special warnings you'll want to fix ahead of time. I mean, you'll be able to correct some of those. Some of them are just going to have to stay. It just depends. And if you ever have a question on whether you should send it through with a warning or a special warning, just give us a call and we can talk through it with you. Then on the next part, because that was where the errors are, then you go to the 8.5 to look up those errors. And if you ever get out of this and want to come back, if you click on LEA validation errors, then it'll give you a list of those again. The validation rules count tells you how many fatals, how many special warnings, and how many warnings you have, and that's all under that validations tab. And again, here is where you find the business rules and validations 8.5 on that front page of the TEDS for using Teams only. If you want to look up some information for a specific student or staff member that's within the PIEMS data that you've already put through there, then you can go to Access Data. It's one of the tabs at the top of this menu bar. And you can click on Search Submission Data. And it'll allow you to put in what category it is, a subcategory. So say you want to look at a student school leaver record, you could put a student in category, subcategory would be school leaver, and then you can also select a specific student's name and look specifically for that student. Before you finalize the submission, you're going to want to go through all those reports, and you're going to want to review them, print them out for the special programs directors and or the administrator, and have them look through it one more time, because whatever you're putting in there is coming based on information they've provided for you. So make sure that you print those reports and show them this is what I'm submitting to PIEMS. So if you need to make any changes, let's take care of that now. So you go into, look at the reports, you'll go to View Reports in the tab, and you'll click on whichever report you want to look at, either standard, special, student leaver, and then now we have a bundled reports down at the bottom. And right now, we can bundle those by through LEA. They're going to be adding the campus capability as well. Right now, it's just based on LEA, but that's a great new function where you can bundle those reports and look at them all at one time. And then under View Reports, this screen will come up, and when it says it's in progress, then you can click on that refresher, and then when it says download, you can click on download. Some reports, you will see these different columns. Either they're available in a PDF, an XLS, or a CSV. And so you can decide, if you have those options, you can decide in which format you want to print them. If you do need to print reports by campus, then from this main menu, you click on the View Reports, the little box down the bottom, and select Teams. And then you do View Reports. And then up at the top, in that dark blue section, that's where you will select whether you want to do the elementary, the high school, junior high, or the district. So that's where you can do it by campus. Then you can go in and select which reports you want, whether they're standard or special, and refresh again. The same thing. And then on the parameters, this is the View Reports, where you can select different parameters, and you can select which campus you want to pull, and then add whatever report you want to get from there. Now, the delete utility. Whenever you're putting new files in, let's say that you have a student who is coded as bilingual, and you've sent files in. And now you decide that that was coded incorrectly and you need to remove it. Well, if you're just putting files in on top of it, it's going to keep that coding for him. The new files you send in are only going to replace or add to, but they're not going to take off anything that's stuck in there. So you would have to actually delete those files to be able to send the new ones through to replace that information. New files will override, and it will replace, and it will add to, but it won't delete information you have in there. And if you ever have a duplicate record, then you'll have to use a delete utility to get rid of that. The delete utility is found on this screen in the EDM data loads, and it's over on the left-hand side. The delete utility, it's in the EDM menu, and it'll give you two different options. It'll say My Deletes, where you can look at past deletes, or a new delete request. And if you're wanting to do a new delete, then it will allow you to select a specific thing that you want to delete by opening up the window next to the submission that we're looking at. This will be 2018 Fall 1. And so you can just click on the little blue plus mark, and it'll open it up and tell you the different collections that are in there. And then you decide by clicking on that blue arrow next to it which one you want to delete, whether it's a certain category or all of it. Just remember to try not to do the delete all very often. We looked at those statistics earlier, and we don't want to overdo that and bog up down the system. And then when you say that you want to delete something, it'll ask you to review it. It'll ask you to add a comment, and then you click on Preview Delete, and it'll show you what you're about to delete. When you're ready to do it, you do Confirm Delete, and then it'll go through, and it'll say Pending until you see it marked to Success, and then that's when it's taken it. Now, we've got all that data cleaned up. We've got our new files in. We've replaced those files that needed to be deleted, and we're ready to prepare and finalize the data. Now, make sure you have all those reports back from the special programs areas and from administrators. Make sure those are all confirmed and verified. And when you have all that ready and you're ready to go, then you're going to prepare and finalize the data. So you're going to click on that thumbs up on this screen. Prepare and finalize. And when you go in there, it's going to bring this screen up. It's going to ask you it's going to show you which collection you're validating, and then you're going to want to verify it. You click on Verify. And then after they've all been verified, you'll see the verified status over on the right-hand side, and you'll click on Complete. It'll say the completion is in progress, and then after it has gone through that and has been verified, and validated, then, or I'm sorry, it gets to verified, then you're able to click on a box. I'll show you where it is right there. It'll say, by checking this box, I acknowledge that I'm submitting this. You click on Confirm, and then you enter a comment. And you're not quite done. Even though you've completed yours, you're not quite done until you go in and have the superintendent do it. So after you have finished, you've clicked that, you've said, I'm ready to go with it, then it'll say validated, and then you're ready to get the superintendent's SOA. So you're going to complete it, but then also he or she has to complete it. You let them know that you're ready, that you've got all that data, you've looked over it, the special programs have looked over it, and you're ready for it to go through. Then he or she will log into this Tsds and do prepare finalized data, and they're going to approve or reject it, and they're going to put in a comment. There's also another place where they have to hit confirm, and they have to do it in both places as far as approving it and confirming it for it to actually go through to us. When they do that, then we can see it in the superintendent's approval, and then we're ready to send it through to TEA. So the fall PEIMS submission is due to us by November 30th, and then we'll send it in the following week. December 7th is when we have to have it to TEA. So make sure that you get those in on time. Then the resubmission is due to us by January 11th. The resubmission is not mandatory. It's only if you have something that needs to be changed or you didn't get something completed for the first one, then you can do the resubmission, but you don't have to do a resubmission unless you have data. Now, in your packet, I also gave you a submission checklist. So you've got that. It goes through all the steps that we just went through in a few pages. I also gave you this chart that you can follow with all the steps. It'll tell you if there's a green and a red, that just means that you've gotten to a place on a status where either you're good to go with all greens or you've got a red. It tells you what to do if you get that red and what to do if you get the green. So everything at the top of this chart is going to be what's happening prior to going into the ODS. When you get to this last step on the first part of this chart, that's when it drops into the ODS and it's sitting there. Then the bottom half of the chart is how it gets into PEIMS. So does anyone have any questions on any of that? I will send you another copy of this process map if you'd like to have that and blow it up onto a larger piece of paper. I'll send that to you. And other than that, we are at the end of the process. If you would like to stay and work on some of your files or work on anything with us in here, then just hang around and we'll get started on those in just a minute. Are there any questions before we close down this part of the morning? Any questions from distance learners? Michelle, do you see any questions on there? Okay. If you're not staying for the afternoon, if you'll fill out that survey so that we can get your certificate to you, you can drop it in that black box on the back table. And, oh, we've got some drawings. So let's see. Tina, would you pick a number between 1 and 25? Woo! Would you like a cup or a lunch bag? Okay. All right, Tammy, would you pick a number? 17. Tiffany. All right, congratulations. Yeah, I can see that. All right, thank you all for coming today, and stick around if you have any questions or if you want to do some of your work. Okay, thank you.